Hey y'all, it's Jodi here, and you're listening to my flippin' podcast.
Y'all, you just gotta embrace the suck.
I'm in my 30s. I have 3 kids,
All born in different decades.
selling houses, flipping houses, renting houses, raising kids, random farm animals.
I can't deal.
Hey y'all, it's Jodi Terrell, your host of My Flippin' Podcast, and today I am so excited to have Mr. Mack Butler with us. Mack is a very well-known figure in this town. I'm so pleased that you decided to join us today. Mack's been involved in a little bit of everything. You've got Butler Electric, which I guess was your first
Yes, ma'am.
Your first business venture and still your main gig.
Right.
And then Mack's also been involved in politics and, of course, real estate. So today he said nothing's off limits. So we're just going to roll into it, talk a little bit about everything. Definitely, Mack has the heart of a servant. I know that from talking with him before we started filming. I think he's got a wealth of information to share with us and an entrepreneurial spirit.
Absolutely.
Which I love.
Thrilled to be here.
Yes, thank you. So first of all, I want to talk about one little thing. Because when I told you where we record at the Federal Building, you said, what'd you tell me that you used to do
in
here?
1974, I delivered papers downtown Gadsden for the Gadsden Times, but I delivered the paper here to the Army recruiters downstairs and the FBI upstairs on the 3rd floor. But I loved this building. So at 11 years old, I'd ride my bicycle all over Gadsden, delivering the paper. That was my first paper route. Actually got hit by a car downtown Gadsden and jumped up and ran. The lady thought she had killed me, but I was embarrassed. My handlebars were all twisted. But
You thought you were in
I
trouble.
just pedaled off, yeah.
That's the difference between kids then
Yeah,
and
nowadays
now.
they lay there and have 10 attorneys there for them, but I was not hurt. My bike was hurt a little bit, but I just kept on going. But yeah, this spring, coming up the stairs with you today brought back memories because I literally would run up and down those stairs at 11 years of age.
That's awesome.
It's funny, some of the buildings that I used to deliver the paper to, we now own, Connie and I. Own, so I think that's kind of cool.
That
Never
is.
thought that we'd be involved in real estate or the electrical business or politics for that matter.
But God had other plans
Absolutely.
for you.
The good Lord's blessed us, and I always laugh when Butler's synonymous with service. So
Yeah. So Butler Electric, let's go there. So you started out obviously with a good work ethic because you were 11 years old, riding your bicycle all over Gadsden, delivering newspapers, and now we can't get 11-year-olds to ride their bikes to the mailbox, to their mailbox.
I got married at 21. Connie was 20. And looking back now, I think, boy, we were young. But at the time, we didn't seem it. But at 21 years of age, I became a certified master electrician, which, believe it or not, far as we know, I'm still the youngest there's ever been. It's hard to get your time in to take your test and all, but I started really early. So at 22 years of age, we'd been married less than a year, I worked out a notice, and Connie and I started Butler Electric. And God has blessed us greatly, and we've got an incredible team that we're surrounded with every day. I have family working with us. Got my nephew and 2 of our sons working with us. So we're thrilled to have that. And I guess about 21, 22 years ago, Connie and I delved into real estate. And we kind of jumped in with both feet on that and just have a passion for restoring old properties, whether residential or commercial. We get a little too attached to them and probably put too much blood, sweat, and tears in some of them.
Because Mack doesn't do like a typical landlord fix, because your houses are really beautiful.
We try to really fix them nice, and we don't sell anything.
Right.
We like to hold them, and to me, real estate is one of the few things that is very forgiving. And I say that I could overpay for something or overspend, and it's forgiving because you had enough time back. It will, with income producing properties.
Right.
You can be, forgiven for such. Yeah. That's not the facts in other businesses. But real estate is really powerful. I read a book many years ago, you probably read, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. The very first one that really struck a nerve with me, that we got rolling with. And what I took away from that is you got to be willing to work for free. Yeah. And so that's what we look at. That, but Connie and I are passionate about fixing up these houses. We're redoing 2 right now in Rainbow City that are about 100 years old. But we have cabins in the mountains, and we love going to antique stores and find things to, give the right, just a little decorator appeal. Connie's got a great eye for colors, and just we've got a cabin in Mentone, and we've got a canoe in there from the 1800s. It's hand carved out of a single piece of cypress. We found that in Dallas, Texas, and it's this huge canoe, but we mounted it on the wall like a piece of art. But things like that. When we saw it, we didn't know what we were going to do with it. We just knew we had to have it.
Yeah.
But we're always looking for that, going to junk stores, antique stores, auctions. It's something we enjoy doing together.
I long for that in my life.
Well, we've got a barn full of junk.
To do more fun shopping and less lumber shopping. So what made you jump into real estate? So because you had a successful business. I mean, you still have Butler Electric.
Yes.
You guys do mostly commercial, right?
We do, yes.
Okay.
We do commercial, and we've been very blessed. We will do it. I tell people all the time, we're barefoot and hungry. We'll do anything, but our focus is commercial. And we go around within a 2-hour radius of Etowah County. But you learn a lot. Any electrician's going to be part carpenter, part plumber, and the same thing for the other trades. They all have to do just a little bit, but you learn a lot. But just developed a love for real estate. When Connie and I first got married, we bought our first house, and we started fixing it up. And a lot of it we did ourselves. Connie and I, it's funny trying to put up crown molding. She was the one that figured out how to hold it, to cut it in a little miter box the first time, but a lot of things because I'd never done that before. But anyway, it was actually a very enjoyable process. But we lived in the house, and so when we started out with commercial properties, and we finally got to residential after a few years. But we bought 16 at one time, so we jumped in feet first on those.
Wow.
It's a lot of roof upkeep and toilets unclogged and air conditioning work.
Are you managing everything yourself?
I have a lot of help. I have a great team in place that we started out originally using a local company that managed the houses, and they did a great job. And believe me, we're still learning. But as we've learned a lot, we would start taking them back as they came vacant, and we now have all of them 100% that we manage ourselves.
Yeah.
But we've got a lot of crews that take care of them, and then collecting rent and processing. A lot of it's done at Butler Electric. Our staff there is a huge help.
Yeah. So when you bought 16 at one time, I'm assuming you just bought a portfolio.
A guy was wanting to sell them. A realtor called me, and I said not interested. She called me back again and called me again. I said, well, I'll go look at them. And I couldn't even go inside them. I think I was able to get into a couple of them because they were all rented. But when I looked at the numbers, I thought, this is something I'm interested in. But it's funny, looking at that, I didn't take into effect vacancies, the maintenance. There's a lot more to it because the numbers looked really good. But as you know, dealing with properties, the reality is if you don't collect it, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Right now we've got this eviction moratorium going on.
I'm glad you brought that up because I was about to say something.
And the banks, I think it's totally unconstitutional because we're in a sovereign state. It's a private contract between two private citizens, and the CDC is who's issued this. They're a federal agency. I know how our founders would have dealt with something like that, and not that far back, state governments are very powerful. The problem is the federal dollar, they've bowed down and let them run over them and do all kinds of things. But we are sovereign states. People forget that. And we have, regardless how you feel about a mask mandate is not a law. A legislative body has to pass that. And that's what I joke with people, going, show me an actual law where it says that. There's not one.
Right.
Like in Montgomery, they passed one early on. Well, they tried to get the council to pass it. They refused, so the mayor did an executive order. It's not worth the paper it's written on. And there's been people around the state that have actually been arrested from things that have stemmed from it. And I've done several Facebook posts explaining to people, you might be convicted at the local level, but upon appeal, you would be exonerated because there is no law in place. It takes a legislative body to pass it. You can't just say, hey, we're doing this or this or this. Didn't mean to get off on masks, but that's just one simple invasion of liberty.
Well, and I think people have forgotten that the states form the federal government.
That's right.
And that the problem that I think that we have, if we're going to get political for a minute, because y'all know I love politics, and Mac does too, so we may just go off in a hole here. But, you know, the problem that I think we have right now is that people have forgotten that the federal government was supposed to be a very, very small, with small, central, and not very powerful.
Right.
And you want it that way because you want the people who are controlling your day-to-day life, they need to be closest to you, where
and
your vote matters.
And accountable to you.
Yes.
But if you get into this, I mean, it's so simple, you know, to ratify the Constitution, we had the Bill of Rights. In the number 10, the 10th Amendment talks about states' rights. And the states, they keep everything that was not delegated to the federal government.
Yes.
Really very little was ever delegated to them. They've just taken a lot, and we've sat back and allowed it. But a perfect example of where we've seen huge abuses, and even right here in conservative Alabama, you know, our governor, we the people allowed, I was screaming and hollering as a few were, but we allowed them to shut down churches, they shut schools, but what she deemed essential and they kept open in conservative Alabama, they kept abortion clinics and liquor stores open while she closed churches. Well, like it or not, number one, the First Amendment says Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. We don't need their permission to go to church. We have the right to peacefully assemble. We have the right to travel in our foundational liberties, the Constitution. And all this was restricted. Even one time, you know, Florida wouldn't let me come down there. Remember, they were on the interstate, and I really liked that governor. He started out backwards, but he quickly got on the program. But, you know, they were even stopping people on the interstate. Well, as a U.S. citizen, you have the right, the freedom to travel. But all these foundational liberties were abused. Now, we all know there was no COVID at Home Depot. There was no Home Depot at Walmart, but it was at the mom and pop local furniture store that only had a few customers. But we allowed those abuses, and I hope we learned a lot from this. And just right now, you know, the federal government's trying to dictate. We're seeing now this, you're seeing a vaccine passport that's coming up. They're trying to a lot of talk about. My liberty you know, alarm is going off big time.
Oh, and they're pushing the vaccine with kids now. I was watching that this morning. I was on a couple of different networks, and they were saying, oh, you know, I guess it was Moderna that came out and said it was 100% effective in children. 100%. Well, the death rate in children is so insignificant. Why on earth?
The virus is very real, but we know there's a 99.7% survival rate. And with the vaccine, it's probably bumps it up to 99.8. And I think we're making some strides in the right direction, but it's just the Dr. Fauci's of the world are so upset that the numbers are falling so. You know, hospitalizations here in Alabama, the trends are the opposite of what they want us to believe, but they really are. Hospitalizations are down, the infection rates are down. We're moving. And one simple fact, states with the mask mandate, we know now, fared no better than the states without. But it is funny now, the literal mask police that a lot of citizens have become, that they would have you believe someone without a mask would be dead by now.
Yeah.
You know, but the reality is, it's not the case. And just with personal liberty and freedom, I know we would have had a big pot of tar going and a pile of feathers over here for a lot of these guys, especially, and we are in a conservative, in a good place, but you look at some of these other states, New Jersey, New York, California, where they're shutting down, there is absolutely no reason that we're not having school, you know, but across the nation, they're not having school in a lot of places. But, you know, one thing that bothered me about the safer at home order, we're not safer at home. Some people are in isolation. They're having anxiety, mental anguish. We need human interaction. And we allowed people, they kept saying follow the science. They refused to follow the science on a lot of things.
Oh, yeah, the CDC totally backed down off the science when it came to reopening schools.
And we know, we know, you can Google this, how important human touch is. A newborn baby, especially a preemie, needs that touch. But all of us need human touch and interaction. One of the worst things they do to a prisoner is put them in isolation.
Yeah.
We have allowed people to be put in isolation all over, and a lot of us didn't even question it. But my liberty alarm's been going off with a lot of things that have happened that hopefully we've learned a lot. I'm kind of a protectionist. I'm America first all the way. I was a Trump delegate twice. If we can't get in America, then we look outside, but we look at Americans first. But, the things we're doing, we're putting immigrants in hotels while we have veterans on the street. I think let's take
Or what
care of
about
our
the
veterans
National
first.
Guard in D.C.?
Yeah, perfect example.
Of
Of not taking care of our own. But buying all these things, we were energy independent, and now we're coming under this administration back dependent, and I can't believe that people aren't paying attention. If you go to the pumps and fill up, you ought to be seeing what's doing. And there's always, just like in Montgomery with the gas tax that was passed back a few years ago, we were talking about, that was rammed through the very first vote of our new elected representatives that said they wanted to be our voice in Montgomery. They went there and they voted the voice of special interests. And not only did they raise the gas tax, they did a perpetual tax increase called indexing. So as the price of any goods or materials that go into road building, as they go up, they automatically get a tax increase. That's 100% unconstitutional. Revenue measures have to begin in the House, have to be voted on, and to be accountable to the people. And this was an automatic one that's going through unless somebody questions it. That needs to be repealed. $62 million a year of existing tax revenue prior to this last gas tax increase was funding other state agencies, and that's been that way for ages, meaning that too much revenue was being produced already by the gas tax. Because there was a small coalition that I was part of in Montgomery against two governors that we kept the gas tax from even being able to come up to the floor for a vote, because just a handful of us said no. As soon as I was gone, that didn't happen anymore. But we kept telling people, take that $62 million and spend it on roads.
Yeah.
But it's our interests are not well represented, as you can see, just in this simple thing. And a lot of things, it's always follow the money. Mm-hmm. But I kind of got way off from real estate.
This is all really good. And I mean, when politics is everything, and real estate makes the world go round. I think a lot of that goes hand in hand, because a lot of these policies that are being made and decided in Montgomery and Washington D.C. it affects everything. It affects real estate. It affects business. It affects And
if we keep letting the Fed step in without questioning such, the CDC. There's been two federal judges that have ruled this unconstitutional on the eviction moratorium. But during the swine flu, the Spanish flu, in 1918, we didn't have this. During World War I, we didn't have this. During World War II, we didn't have this. The problem is, I know as a landlord, we've forgiven a lot of rent. We have mercy and grace, and that's what people do. But I want it to be my decision, not the federal government's. We have worked with a lot of people doing things to get through this, but the reality is the bank does not cut us one bit of slack. Our property taxes not cut one bit of slack. I pointed out to a lot of people during the shutdown, when the government was shutting down all these businesses, are your licenses or all your fees going to be prorated for these months? No, they weren't. Nothing was done. They basically are wanting more now.
Well, they want us to cut our budget, but they don't want to cut their budget.
Montgomery's about to raise unemployment rates because of they kept and I had a couple of bogus claims against us, and it's funny, we kept fighting them, and they kept saying they're going to do them. I had one employee that never missed a day of work, but he had filed because he thought he could get that extra $600 a week. And finally, after I got the last letter that said they were going to award these monies to him, of course I called Montgomery, couldn't get anybody. I texted the Secretary of Labor and told it him, and of course he called me within 2 minutes and he took care of it. But how many of those, not everybody had the Secretary of Labor's cell number, how many of those went through and they spent all that money, and so now they want to come to all the businesses and say, oh, hey, you guys, even though you didn't lay anybody off, y'all need to pay more every year. But that's typical government. That is meant to be a safety net for people that need it. But in everything, fraud, waste, and abuse is a major issue.
Well, and that's why those programs need to be small and local.
Absolutely.
And that's one of the things that I've been an advocate for, which was to get rid of any type of welfare program that's on a federal level, because you can't. The people in Washington D.C. have no idea what's going on in Gadsden, Alabama. So how do you know if these people are, if it was back local, if it was back in the hands of the community and the churches, then we would know. We'd be like, no. You're absolutely able to work. You don't want to work, so get out of the food line. And then you have families that maybe are in need or whatever, and the community would know and they would rally. And we know this because anytime we have a storm or somebody does have a house fire or some sort of tragedy, the community takes care of them.
Rallies
the federal
together.
government doesn't.
Right.
You know, the community does. And so, yeah, we're
Back
on the
in
same page
Montgomery,
there.
I think it was in 2014, we passed a piece of legislation that basically said you couldn't spend, the temporary financial assistance where we give people literally cash. We said they couldn't spend it because there had been some reports where they had, it was in Atlanta, they had hired prostitutes and they had gone to a liquor store and some of them had bought lottery tickets. And we put in legislation that you couldn't buy those three things. And it was comical because the Democrat Party went crazy. Of course, we had a supermajority and we passed it. But there's zero enforcement of that because when you hand someone cash, unless you're going to follow them around, you couldn't.
Right.
But we were trying to send a message. This needs to be to put a roof over your head, to feed your children. I mean, it was a temporary emergency financial assistance. But the reality was when they followed them, they were spent for all kinds of shenanigans that shouldn't have been done.
Oh, yeah. I
But
mean,
there's always fraud, waste, and abuse, and there's some legitimate cases that need it. But, prior to the federal government, that was taken care of through the church. And the church was a great clearinghouse. My best example goes back to the founding of this nation. When the Pilgrims got here, they lived kind of in a socialist society. They were, in that first winter, they were starving to death. Nobody wanted to work. And it's funny, you can pull up online and read Bradford's Diaries. It's fascinating. Where he finally, because no matter what they sowed, everybody got a share of it, whether you work the garden or not. So you can see where he says, all right, finally, he said, Jodi, this 10 acres over here is yours. Whatever you sow, you reap. Well, Jodi started getting there a little early, taking the kids, staying late, and she had this huge bounty. They got here in 1621, but in 1623, when that Thanksgiving, the bounty was so phenomenal. That was actually when they had it. Was when Bradford did it. And it was funny. He said, I would have been accused of tyranny and oppression had I ever said these people were not too infirm to work. But he was blown away. And that was the baby steps of capitalism. When he was first trying to do the baby steps of private property rights. But it's just like today. When somebody works 40 hours and they get a second job or work overtime, I personally think you have paid your fair share of taxes. You should not be taxed. You ought to be able to reap the fruit of your labor just like Bradford did. Because anybody that with employees knows that a lot of them don't want to work overtime because the government hits them so hard.
yeah.
And that literally is what puts the boat in the driveway, is they ought to be able to reap the fruit of their labor. Because you need to have an incentive to work.
To work harder and to do more. Yeah, absolutely.
The Bible talks a lot about poverty, and it talks a lot about a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands, and poverty will creep upon you in Proverbs. It tells you if you don't work, you don't eat. We need to celebrate work. It says in Genesis 3:19, by the sweat of your brow, so shall you eat all the days of your life. We are meant to work and produce. And we've now got government trying to penalize someone to not work. Just like if you're on government assistance, a lot of people will not get a job or pursue a higher paying job because they want to keep that. I think we ought to leave that in place while you get your skill set up or your education up, and then wean you off of it to get you better, not make it a way of life. Generational poverty is a passion of mine that we need to get people off of. Because we've got generation after generation after generation, they've never gone to work, they've never had an alarm clock. One of the first things we did in Montgomery was when Airbus came, we did the post-secondary dual enrollment for career tech training. I'm a career tech guy. If it hadn't been for a man named Johnny Parker, back then it was called vocational school, that saw this little skinny kid that had little interest in school but took an interest in me, literally took me home with him, and I would work for him on the Saturdays after school, teaching me the electrical business. I wouldn't be here today. But we need to find these people. But when Airbus came, they needed 900 welders. Starting pay was $50,000 a pop.
Wow.
So we started this program where you could be a high school student and you could do post-secondary dual enrollment career tech, and it was paid for by other businesses that got tax credits. So it was pretty sharp. But you literally now can graduate high school with an associate degree in plumbing, electrical, carpentry, or whatever you want. But that's what got it started, was that need that we could, 23% of the population gets a 4-year degree. I'm a perfect example. Everybody's not set up to go the academic route.
Right.
When I spent 10 years on the Board of Education, which was some of the best memories I have, I felt like we made a positive impact in a lot of students. The goal is to get students career ready or college ready. And we didn't focus on the career part. And just now we're starting to realize that, hey, we do need, we need doctors, lawyers, Indian chiefs, but we need plumbers, electricians, carpenters, we need truck drivers.
Yes.
Let's push this. A lot of people, do very well and excel at that. So anyway, I see that as being another avenue to break generational poverty. Because you take somebody that has been in generational poverty and they graduate high school and they've got a welding job, now they've even got some benefits, they're working full time, it will change their life. It's like all the posts on Facebook, people talking about, if a $600 or $1,400 stimulus check would change your life, think what a job would do.
Wow.
But it is so powerful if you've got that day in, day out, you could leverage that and buy anything you want. I mean, I'm a perfect example. We had very humble means growing up, but you can literally figure out a way with the right mindset, you can literally do anything you want. You have to figure out a way to afford it.
Yeah.
People say, how did you have a cabin in Gatlinburg? It's easy. You put it on a rental program, and other people are helping me pay for it. And oh, by the way, I'm getting to depreciate it too, on top of that. So it's phenomenal once you figure out how this works, and anybody can do it. I'm not special in what we've done. Now, we've put the blood, sweat, and tears into it, and literally anybody could do it.
Yeah. I'm trying to absorb everything you just said. We're speaking the same language because especially I'm very passionate about the career tech and the fact that we have sort of I think we've made a lot of these kids in this younger generations coming up feel like that it's shameful to be in a trade.
And they are burdened with school debt for ages. And the joke is, what was one college graduate say to the other? And others like, welcome to McDonald's, would you take the order, please? Because so many have trouble finding a job. But I remember at Gadsden High School, going to vocational school, riding a bus, that other students made fun of us. That's no joke.
Yeah.
But they're not making fun now.
No.
Across the board, we need these people. And we got to have our doctors, lawyers, Indian chiefs, but we do need the others. As we're saying, we need plumbers, electricians, carpenters, carpet installers. We need all these trades.
I mean, being in real estate, and it's funny you said carpet installers because the guy that's done my carpet and vinyl for years, bless his heart, he keeps trying to retire. They just won't let him retire. I mean, the flooring stores, they can't find anybody. They call him every day. His knees are worn out. He should have retired 5-10 years ago, but he just keeps working because they keep calling and begging him to work.
When we pay people to not produce and not work, that's a problem.
Yeah.
And right now, with across the nation, a lot of this stimulus has been well intended and good, but a lot has actually had an opposite effect. It's hard to get people to show up to work. I was talking to somebody yesterday that his crew laid out because they didn't need the money this week. They're good for a couple of weeks. One thing in education, which I'm passionate about, I served on education policy in Montgomery, is we do a pretty good job on academics. We are doing a horrible job with financial literacy.
Yes.
Students need to learn some financial literacy, need to understand interest. How many kids even know how to write a check? Everybody now has a little card, they use. But financial literacy needs to be focused on, and a lot of times the people even teaching the financial literacy do not understand it. I really think being 11 years old, working for the public, collecting at the time, a paper was 10 cents. But at 11 years old, I had people that moved off and beat me out of their paper bill. I had to pay their paper bill. I got a wealth of education just delivering the Gadsden Times. Yeah. That you learn a lot of psychology about folks, but because someone that'll do an 11-year-old kid wrong, they're probably not going to be a good husband or wife or whatever. Not going to be a good parent because everything we're doing. And one of the I get a lot of flack for saying this, what I'm fixing to say, but this is a fact. The number one indicator of poverty, do you know what it is? It's fatherless homes.
Yeah, fatherless homes, yes.
And people get so upset when you say that. The number 2 is no high school diploma. Number 3 is drug use. But the federal government under Lyndon B. Johnson provided a financial incentive to remove the father from the home. We need to provide a financial incentive to put the father back. a lot of good things. And I see a lot of parents that are not in the same home, but that dad is still in their life. Dads are important. So many times the moms have been doing all the work, but they need dad too.
Well, and I always say the number one destroyer of wealth is divorce, because that's the thing. And I just wanted to add this really fast, but the thing about fatherless homes or having a one income house, that's the thing that I feel like that I want people to say it so that it clicks. It's not about, oh, you're just decided you were going to have a baby and be a single mom and be on welfare and that's your lifestyle. It's you need to think beyond that. Don't get caught up in that view, because literally if you have two people working and you still only have one rent, one mortgage, one power bill, it's easier. So then you can save, you can invest in education or in a business or in something else, because you're not, I do not know how people survive.
But the chaos that's provided, simple as watching mom or dad or both get up and go to work every day, you are sending a message.
Yes.
Watching dad protect, love, honor his wife, you're sending a message. Our firstborn is getting married Saturday.
Oh, congratulations!
And we're thrilled. But I hope, I've told her from her early age, that there's not another man on this planet that has her interest at heart like me. Well, I think we actually have met the young man, Chad Sharp, and Morgan are getting married Saturday. But awesome. And we love Chad, but they need to see that. I mean, they need to see, I try to often as I can open the door for my wife and protect her and honor her, because I'm sending a message to my three boys as well as my daughter.
That this is how you're supposed to behave as a man, as a husband, and as the head of the household. And don't jump on me for saying that. But I believe that, first of all, there's a difference between women and men.
There are.
Yes, biology,
left brain,
psychology,
right brain.
Everything. And we're not really created to handle a lot of the stress and pressure, and I think that it's to have that functioning marriage. And we're, Josh and I have been married for 17 years, and I don't pretend like we're perfect and we have it all figured out. But, I make a lot of the decisions. I mean, people who know us personally, I'm the mouth, I'm the face, but when it comes down to really big things, I'll express my opinion and then I'll let him decide.
But you'll complement one another.
We do.
And you do together. And I just think if we can get dad back in the picture, even if he's not in the home, get him in the picture. We can impact children's lives. So many children are raised in chaos. We were talking about the horrors of rentals, where I was talking about I had one the lady had 5 children, and when I went in the house, we had to evict her. And this is thankfully not the case with majority of them, but this one, every room, it's got broken windows, has holes in the wall where it looks like somebody was body slammed through there. But it's probably just chaos, and that mother's probably doing all she can do. But I'm sure she's leaving, going to work. We need a stable environment for children, and so many of they're being raised by their cell phone or by the TV. The internet's got all kinds of good things, but it's got so many bad things.
Oh, unbelievable.
But if we could stay focused and stay together, I personally believe Lyndon B. Johnson injured America more than any other president. If you look at all the things he did, he literally stole his Senate seat. I think he was complicit in the JFK deal.
A lot of people think that.
If you look at some of the things, and I won't get into all that, but I love history and studying things. But he was a disgusting human. If you read about him, he was very profane. He loved to urinate in front of his secretaries. He once urinated on a Secret Service agent and told him that was presidential prerogative. In the movie where Woody Harrelson is portraying him, they portrayed him correctly. Woody Harrelson is sitting on a toilet dictating a letter to his secretary. Who would elect a nut job like that? Well, we still keep electing people like that. But
who would elect a guy that thinks Guam's going to tip over?
I remember that one.
He's still on committee.
It's just, but when he provided a financial incentive to remove the father from the home, I just thought that was the most devastating thing ever. He also, you've heard of the Johnson Amendment, which so many churches now won't say a word about politics.
Yeah.
You won't have a church, very few. Thankfully, I know a few good pastors that will actually say abortion's murder. It is, without a shadow of a doubt. That baby has its own heartbeat, its own DNA, its own fingerprints. We are to defend the defenseless. But very few churches say anything, and they get in politics, they say because of the Johnson Amendment. Well, that's from Lyndon B. Johnson when he was a senator, that literally silenced the church. We never would have the civil rights movement had it not been for the church, speaking. And the church used to get out front and speak in things. But I'm fascinated, if you study the founding of this nation, of what happened. And with the Johnson Amendment, I tell churches all the time, you need to preach the truth. And if you're worried about taxes, pay your taxes. It's a lack of faith to say you're thinking God won't provide. But, if you study, when the famous Paul Revere ride was going on, people think the first 4 battles of the Revolutionary War were fought by the National Army. They weren't. Do you know who fought those?
No.
The church. Paul Revere is riding to Reverend Jonas Clark's house because Samuel Adams and John Hancock were there. And he wasn't saying the British are coming. They were all British. He was saying the regulars are coming. So the British regulars are coming, but they were coming to kill those guys. But when Paul Revere gets there, he's frantic. They're coming to kill these guys. And Reverend Clark goes, that's all right. Me and my men will have this. But the first 4 battles, Bunker Hill, Concord, Road to Boston, these first 4 battles were fought by the church. And my point is the church needs to get back into the battle. Most people don't know this, but originally all 13 states, to hold elected office, you had to profess Christ. John Jay, first Chief Justice of our U.S. Supreme Court, appointed by George Washington, you can pull up this quote, said, we are to select and prefer Christians to hold elected office. So my point when I said the church has got to get back into the battle, they need to get involved in politics. And we need to select and prefer Christians to hold elected office. And that's the battle we need when I was talking to you, that you need to run for office. We need people like Jodi Terrell up there. We do.
Don't tempt me, Mack.
But we need to electing Christians for city council, mayors, county commissions, all the way up.
Yeah.
And you would see the nation change. None of us are perfect, but if we're striving for that, I'm so thankful for grace. The good Lord had to give me a triple dose to cover Mack. But do you imagine the difference if that was our goal? When you look at when people say we weren't founded a Christian nation, it's hard to deny it when our U.S. Capitol was used as a church for almost 70 years. Every president from Jefferson to Lincoln attended church at the U.S. Capitol. The 10 Commandments is all over D.C. Guess what's on the inside and outside of the U.S. Supreme Court? The 10 Commandments, where number 6 says, thou shalt not murder, and those lawyers in robes, condemned babies to die. And if we find a bacteria on Mars, we say we found life, but they won't.
That was powerful.
But they won't say a living, breathing. I mean, a baby outside the womb. It's just funny how they'll literally say it's a clump of cells. It's not. We know that baby feels pain. In Montgomery, I passed signed in law to ban dismemberment abortions. Dismemberment abortions are done in second, third trimester, where the arms and legs of the baby are literally ripped off. The head, and they reassemble the baby out here to make sure they got all the parts. Barbaric. Of course, the Democrats went crazy, and it was immediately blocked by a federal judge. The whole purpose of all this legislation was to get something before the U.S. Supreme Court. If they will look at the facts today, there is no way they could deny, and they will have to outlaw abortion. But it takes 4 justices to sign on to hear a case. They refuse to hear that case right there. And we have seen our Supreme Court repeatedly, in John Roberts, they're starting to come around now, some of these religious liberty cases, but repeatedly, when they're shutting down churches, and people ask me, can they not do that? Actually, they can. The government can, but it has to be across the board. You couldn't have church closed, Walmart open, church closed, Home Depot open, church closed, liquor store open, that type thing. Everything would have to be if it was a true pandemic like that. Even in Florida, and I like DeSantis, but when that first happened, he shut down condos. Condos are owned by people like me and you, mom and pops. But there was no COVID at hotels. Hotels were open. Well, the little dirty secret is hotels have what's called lobbyists.
Oh, yeah.
And it's skyrocketed the revenue. Walmart's, Home Depots, they have lobbyists. But the little mom and pop corner stores, they don't have lobbyists.
This has been the largest transfer of wealth in history.
Yes, they're trying to survive.
Over this past year.
And our government help them do it, and supposed to be fighting for us little guys. That's what I'm saying. We would be ready in our muskets and our tar and feather and go and correct a few things, if this was the founders were still in charge. We've got to celebrate this. But the purpose when I talk about the legislature is the only body that can impeach the other two branches. I would submit to you, if I was in Congress, I would have repeatedly been filing articles of impeachment against our justices, which would get their attention quickly. But it's only been done one time. They need to be, if they're not going to follow the rules, and the Constitution's got that prescription there, we need to remove them. But where they have, it's funny to me. I'm a huge Second Amendment guy. It literally, it's crystal clear. Congress shall not infringe that right, that your right to keep and bear arms. That's there. It's enumerated. We can't miss it. But the courts keep saying, well, we don't know if that really is there. And then at the same time, in the Roe v. Wade, they invented a constitutional right that they all the time go, you have a constitutional right to an abortion. Actually, you don't. I've read the Constitution. It's like even on marriage. The Constitution doesn't deal with marriage. That's a state issue. Regardless of whatever you want to do, the states have all the power. And the federal courts used to recognize this up into just, the 50s and 60s. That's when America really started taking this left turn. And that shows you the importance of election. But what's important when we started to turn was when the church started taking a back seat and go, well, we're just going to pray. Well, you need to be out there championing it. And I'm thankful that we've got a few pastors here that do get out and scream and preach these things. But so many times, I always felt like the nation has looked to the South for moral guidance, but we're looking to our churches for moral guidance. And if your pastor's not going to get up and speak against these things, you really need to find another church, or at least another pastor.
Well, and to your point about the abortion debate and a lot of the other things that are going on, I mean, really just the moral decay of the country.
They've invented a right.
It's happening in hyper speed in front of our eyes, which is the scariest part to me. But really, I agree with everything you're saying about the political angle and the fighting it through the legislature, but we have a heart problem though as a nation, and I think that the church definitely is going to have to take a bigger role in the individual to help spread the gospel and to help bring people around, because you can tell somebody all day long that that's a life, but if they don't value life, you can say, hey, you shouldn't lie. But if you know what I mean? It's sure. A person has to have some sort of conviction.
Absolutes are taught at home.
Right.
In a loving Christian family, those absolutes come. And we've gotten a perfect example is transgender has always been a mental defect. And now if you want to pretend you're a man, we're all supposed to pretend along with you. What's wrong with actually just telling the truth? There is a difference in the X and Y chromosomes. But we're to call things that aren't, and it's just insane that we've got to do this. Where we're legislating areas about the different pronouns that we can't use. We used to celebrate freedom of speech, and now it's funny. We only celebrate. I mean, we celebrate liberal speech now, but we're seem to be censoring conservative speech or anything that deals with Christianity. This nation was, without a doubt, founded a Christian nation, but it was founded on freedom of and even freedom from religion. You could do whatever, but the facts are of how it was founded. On the lottery debate, this was fascinating because I actually voted in Montgomery to allow the people to vote on the lottery. It was killed in the Senate. But in my research, I found out this nation was founded on a lottery. The roads, the bridges, the churches, the schools, the Revolutionary War was funded by a lottery. It's a voluntary tax. And it's funny, I was telling my daddy about my research, and he goes, well, I knew that. He said, because the most sought after lottery ticket is one signed by George Washington. Yeah. He said, I was watching Pawn Stars the other night, and a guy came in with one. And that is true. There was a lottery ticket. They were signed by George Washington, financing the Revolutionary War. So I didn't have a problem with that, but it's just funny that we don't know our history. But a lot of things we get caught up in and get so sidetracked.
With these small issues that affect tiny portions of the population that don't
Gambling
matter.
does not promote hard work. I have no problem with what adults do spend their money on. If you want to spend your money on this or that, as a lover of liberty, have at it. And so we get tied up in too many things, but honestly, if you're truly liberty conscious, a lot of these things we've got to embrace as liberty. As long as you're not out committing crimes and robbing banks, you do what you want to with your money. If you're not hurting anybody, I don't see anybody prospering from gambling, but I've been to Vegas several times. I don't think Alabama needs casino gambling, but I think lottery in Alabama would be absolutely fine. And a lot of people would be shocked to hear me say that. It's just because I think grown people should be able to do what they want to with their money.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I tend to agree with that. I mean, people cross the state lines all the time. I don't really see harm in the lottery. I'm not going to die on that hill.
Yeah, it's just, you're not going to, you could buy it, you're not going to win. The house is always going to win.
Yeah.
But I do.
And real estate's always going to win.
Oh, real estate is a rock solid investment. It's neat. I played the market years ago and didn't do well in it. I love real estate because I can ride by and look at it. I can paint it. I can replace a rotten board. But it's really neat if you can find some old structures and save those, which we're doing this all over Gadsden. Taking an old structure, and a lot of times I'll post them on Facebook, and I always put improving our community one project at a time, because the reality is different things. We know the virus is contagious, but if I mow my grass and paint my house, that's contagious as well, and I'm hoping the neighbors will do it. But if everybody's throwing trash on the ground, everybody else is going to come by and throw trash on the ground. But I'm hoping to actually instill some pride in communities, and I'm amazed that some houses will rent somebody, they'll plant flowers, mow the grass. Now, that's not true of everybody, but a lot of them do, that they're taking pride. And so I'm thinking, if I can do it, it's going to spread throughout the neighborhood. If you ever go up to like Franklin, Morgan lived in Franklin for a while. That was the coolest community. It's pristine. It's very old, a lot of history there. But I love the pride all the people were taking. If we can instill that pride, some neighborhoods you ride through, everybody's out and got flowers and all. But if we could get that back. When I was a paper boy, I can remember in my neighborhood riding my bike, delivering. It's just like everybody, but it is contagious. So that's my thought of doing it, is hoping the next door neighbor will cut their hedges and mow their grass and paint their house and keep going. A lot of that stuff doesn't really cost anything. You're investing a little time.
Right.
But some of that time is great therapy.
Oh.
To get out and mow the grass or cut the hedges.
Oh, I mean, I don't know if you've heard me say this, but we have the farm now, and we did the pumpkins last year, which was crazy because Josh was diagnosed with POEMS, or it's a blood cancer, in May, and we had these big plans to plant pumpkins, and he was really not feeling well, super fatigued, and I said, we can't do this. This is crazy. I'm gonna hold on to my pumpkin seeds. I don't know, but I kept feeling like the Lord was just leading me, just plant these pumpkins. And I just had this word, and I said, you know what better way for God to show out than to give us a beautiful harvest? And we went in head first, and it was a lot of work, and a lot of work for me and my boys, but it probably saved my life.
It's amazing the therapy that comes from it, because after you work hard, you really rest well.
Yes.
Yes. Connie and I both enjoy bush hogging.
Oh, I love
It's just funny sitting on a tractor and bush hogging, and it is, to listen to some music and go, but it's almost
I love
fun.
to mow. Mm-hmm. I learned how to mow.
Later into the year, it becomes work then. But at first, this time of year, it's fun, exciting to weed eat and mow and all that.
I'm not a weed eater, Mac. No, it's not. I don't know if I'm ever going to like that.
But work is ordained of God, without a shadow of doubt. Like we saw in Genesis 3:19. One other thing I want to point out to you that I loved, because I love young people. If someone ever told me I was going to be involved in all the stuff I've been involved with, I would have laughed at you. But I was literally recruited to be the PTSO president at John Jones. And that's what got me into the school board world, which got me into the legislature. But I'm amazed. We would have young people come to Montgomery all the time. And my favorite question to ask them was, why is the Liberty Bell named the Liberty Bell? And never once, and all the time I've asked that, has anybody ever known? And they came up with some great answers. I go, that's a great answer. Wrong. But Leviticus 25:10 is engraved in the side. It says, proclaim liberty throughout the world and all that inhabitants thereof. And I'm a liberty guy. But what's amazing, that bell hung at the Pennsylvania State House, which you would know as Independence Hall.
Right.
Tens of thousands of people parade by it every year. But now we're being told by the left, in Rainbow City, we had a flat Stanley manger scene. That if I told you it was a manger scene, you really couldn't tell. But the Freedom from Religion Foundation, fought us. And
I remember.
we fought them. And so ever since then, Connie and I have been paying for a live nativity to be there because we, the people, are going to peaceful assemble on our town square. And so thought, hey, take that. If you don't like our flat Stanley one, you're really not going to like our live nativity that we have there every year. But if you look at the insanity of it with these rulings, these guys that founded this nation, had a bell that had scripture in it, right. And now you go. The left goes crazy if you have the 10 Commandments. Those are some really good ideals. Thou shalt not murder, thou shalt not steal. I mean, those are some good things in there. But we're so offended by these things. If we could get back to the basics and look at what our founders did, public education that I'm passionate about. You know where it began?
Where?
In the church.
Oh,
public school began in the
that
church.
makes sense.
The first teachers were pastors. They were the most educated person in the community. But the term Sunday school comes from school being taught at church on Sunday. But the very first textbook was the Bible. The first reader was called the New England Primer, that's full of scripture. Every single founding father learned to read with the New England Primer. It's used from 1690 to 1930, 240 years. But a number of the founding fathers, it's a fact, you can look it up, reprinted and distributed those in their states. So when you start saying this is what the guys meant, this and that, the term separation of church and state exists nowhere in a founding document. Most people think it is. I go, show me that. It was in a private letter between the Danbury Baptist in Danbury, Connecticut, and Thomas Jefferson. And what Jefferson wrote back is the exact opposite of what the left will tell you it means. But it's even in conservative Alabama. We had, you're probably too young to remember, but back in the 90s, we had a famous school prayer case. It was, Chandler versus James. Bob James was governor at the time. Mm-hmm. But in Valley Head, Alabama, they were having prayer at school. And a federal judge ruled against Alabama and shut it down. It got turned, but it's just funny that the way school began and all, that we literally said, you can't pray at school. The facts are student-initiated prayer is 100% legal. In 2015, I passed a law in Alabama. It's called the Student Religious Liberties Act. Basically, when a student crosses into a school, they still have all their First Amendment rights. They don't give them up. They can express their religious beliefs in artwork. They can express it in academic work. They literally, if they have the microphone and they're given the valedictorian give a speech, they could even pray if they wanted to. They have a First Amendment right, and they don't give that up. And it made every school board in the state adopt a policy acknowledging such, trying to get that message out that it is legal. But it's just funny that they could, you can't be vulgar or disruptive to the educational process, but you could express your religious liberties. But it's funny how we've gone so far from literally having church in school to now where there's such animosity against anything. People, when I was passing that, telling me that wasn't needed. You can Google it and find all these cases, but all over the places, students have been expelled for bringing a Bible to school, for passing out tracts at school. They have literally had shirts that said Jesus. They had to turn them inside out, but they could wear all kind of profane things. But I'm thankful there's a lot of good people like you that are probably going to run for office one day that will make a positive contribution. We need, my sister always says, don't look for a role model, be a role model. And we need people to literally be role models.
Yeah, I think we're all looking for leadership, and I heard, I listen to lots of podcasts, and besides my own, and I heard a guy say, you are the leader. That's what he was saying. He's like, people kept emailing him and where's the leadership, looking for the leadership. And he's like, be the leader. You have to, and you have to start in your community. You have to start small, because that's really where all this erosion happened. I mean, we didn't just blink and overnight, end up with all these crazy people running the show, and they are crazy.
You look at Washington, D.C., and
they're not us.
And our values are not represented there.
No, not at all.
Used to, your U.S. senators were appointed by the state legislatures. Mm-hmm. And when that was changed, it really hurt the states. I know people think election at large, it does sound good. But what happened, those guys working for the lobbyists now, where they used to work for the state.
Yeah.
The states need to take back their authority, because we are sovereign states. But we need to focus on the good of, I'm all about Alabama. and I'm all about America. But we need to get back in the same time. I'm not worried about the countries that hate us. I'm not worried about the countries that gave us this virus. China is not our friend. And right now the current climate is they're pushing everything that way. But we've got to take back pride in our nation. It's amazing that, our nation's motto is "In God We Trust." But we're not taught that anymore. We're being taught we're safer at home.
Yeah. Man, Mack, I could go for hours.
Well, thanks for having me. I enjoyed being here.
This has been so awesome and so informative. And, so you're still doing real estate. You've got vacation rentals, residential rentals. You're finishing up a couple of projects in Rainbow City. So those are going to be available. And people can find y'all on social media.
Absolutely.
Tell everybody the best way to get in touch with you. Just find you on Facebook.
Well, you can call Butler Electric, but Facebook is an amazing tool. I get a lot of messages there. We have a page. It's under Mack Butler. I post pictures of properties we're doing, but also Butler Properties there.
Butler Properties. Awesome.
But thank you so much for having me. I enjoyed it so much.
Yes, it was great. So that's going to wrap us up for today, you guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. Be sure to like and subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. And you can follow us on social media. You can find us on Facebook at Our Flipping Life, Instagram, our.flipping.life. And of course, if you're in the market for real estate, whether you're an investor or a residential buyer or seller, you can see all of the services that we offer at jngrealestate.com. So thanks again. We'll see you next week. Bye, y'all.